On January 25, 2023, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz stood at a press conference and announced that Germany would send Leopard 2 main battle tanks to Ukraine. The announcement took 331 days to make. For nearly 11 months, Germany had said no. Then it said maybe. Then it said it would only send tanks if America sent tanks first. Then America said it would send Abrams if Germany sent Leopards. Then Germany said yes. The political process that produced that announcement was the most complicated, most watched, and most contested tank procurement decision in the history of NATO. What emerged from it was the deployment of what many military analysts consider the finest main battle tank ever produced, the Leopard 2, the tank that 20 nations operated. The tank that every army that had used it in combat credited with extraordinary crew protection. The tank that Ukraine's President Zelensky had been publicly requesting since the first weeks of the invasion. The tank Germany had been refusing to send for nearly a year. To understand the Leopard 2, you need to go back to 1963 and a decision that shaped Western armored doctrine for the next 60 years. The United States and West Germany agreed to develop a common main battle tank. The project, the MBT-70, was to be the defining NATO tank of the 1970s and beyond. It was cancelled in 1970 after costs tripled and the design grew so complex that maintenance crews could not service it in the field. Germany walked away from the joint program and started again alone. What Krauss-Maffei designed from the wreckage of the MBT-70 program was a vehicle that rejected the MBT-70's complexity and returned to fundamental principles: armor that worked, a gun that killed, an engine that ran, a vehicle that crews could actually maintain. The hull was welded steel with a spaced armor configuration that created air gaps between the outer and inner layers, disrupting shaped charge jets before they reached the crew compartment. The turret incorporated what became known as composite armor, layers of steel, ceramics and other materials in a configuration whose specific composition Germany classified and has never fully disclosed. What the armor's performance demonstrated in testing was that the Leopard 2's crew compartment was protected against every anti-tank weapon in the Soviet inventory at the ranges where engagements were expected to occur. The gun was the Rheinmetall 120mm smoothbore, a decision that broke from the British tradition of rifled guns, and the American adoption of the same weapon would confirm as the NATO standard. The 120mm fired kinetic energy penetrators, long thin rods of depleted uranium or tungsten that depended on velocity rather than explosive charge to defeat armor. At 2,000 meters, the round could penetrate more than 700 millimeters of rolled homogeneous armor equivalent. No tank fielded by the Soviet Union in 1979 could survive a direct frontal hit from the Leopard 2's gun. The engine was an MTU MB-87-3 diesel producing 1,500 horsepower in a vehicle weighing 55 tons. Power-to-weight ratio was 27 horsepower per ton. Road speed was 72 kilometers per hour. Cross-country speed was 50 kilometers per hour. The fire control system incorporated a thermal imaging gunner's sight, a laser rangefinder, a ballistic computer, and a stabilized gun that allowed accurate fire while the vehicle was moving at full speed. A Leopard 2 crew could identify a target at 3,000 meters in darkness, range it, compute a firing solution, and deliver a first-round hit while traveling at 50 kilometers per hour across rough terrain. That combination of protection, firepower and mobility made the Leopard 2 the subject of every NATO army's procurement desire from the moment it entered German service in 1979. The export success of the Leopard 2 was built on performance data and a network of German diplomatic and industrial relationships that made it the preferred option for European NATO allies seeking to upgrade their armored forces. The Netherlands purchased 445 Leopard 2A4 vehicles. Switzerland ordered 380 in a domestic politics decision that confirmed the tank's international credibility. Denmark, Norway, Sweden, Finland, Austria, Spain, Portugal, Greece, Turkey, Poland, Singapore, Canada and Chile all eventually operated Leopard 2 variants. By 2022, 20 nations fielded the vehicle in various configurations. The combat record was concentrated in 2 theaters. In Kosovo in 1999, Danish and German Leopard 2A5 vehicles operated in peacekeeping operations where the vehicle's protection and presence provided deterrence without direct engagement. In Afghanistan from 2006 to 2011, Canadian Leopard 2A6M vehicles deployed to Kandahar province and operated in direct combat with Taliban forces, surviving multiple IED strikes that would have destroyed lighter vehicles. The M suffix designated an additional mine protection package fitted beneath the hull. No Canadian crew died in a Leopard 2 in Afghanistan. The single most dramatic test of Leopard 2 survivability came not in combat, but in an accident that destroyed a vehicle and vindicated the design. In 2014, a German Leopard 2 undergoing training exercises drove off a bridge and fell approximately 8 meters onto its side. The tank was destroyed beyond economic repair. The crew survived. A vehicle weighing 62 tons had fallen 8 meters and the crew walked out. Then Ukraine. The political history of the Leopard 2 decision is a study in alliance politics under pressure. Ukraine began requesting Western main battle tanks in the spring of 2022. The argument was straightforward. Ukrainian forces were fighting Russian armor with Soviet-era tanks, the T-64, T-72 and T-80 variants. Russian forces were fielding the same types with incremental upgrades. The qualitative gap between Ukrainian and Russian armor was narrow. Both sides were using technology that dated from the Cold War. Western main battle tanks would provide a qualitative advantage that Soviet-era vehicles could not match. Thermal imaging, allowing night engagement. Fire control, allowing first-round hits at 3,000 meters. Armor that could survive hits that destroyed Soviet-era hulls. Germany's position was that sending the Leopard 2 would constitute an escalation that risked direct NATO-Russia conflict. The counter-argument, made repeatedly by Poland, the Baltic states, and eventually by most of NATO's European members, was that Russia was already fighting a war of conquest and that withholding capable equipment was not preventing escalation but was enabling continued Russian advance. The debate continued through spring, summer and autumn of 2022. Poland announced it would send its own Leopard 2s to Ukraine with or without German permission, which under German export controls it actually required. The United States, in a decision coordinated with Germany, announced it would send M1 Abrams tanks on a delayed timeline. Germany announced the same day that it would send Leopard 2s on an immediate timeline. The first Leopard 2A6 vehicles arrived in Ukraine in March 2023. Ukrainian crews had trained in Poland during the winter. The training was compressed, 6 weeks instead of the months a full training cycle required. The Leopard 2s entered combat in the Ukrainian counteroffensive of June 2023. The results were mixed in ways that both supporters and critics of the decision interpreted selectively. Several Leopard 2s were destroyed by Russian anti-tank mines, artillery, and the Kornet laser-guided anti-tank missile. The images of destroyed Leopard 2s circulated widely on social media. Russian state media broadcast them as evidence that the acclaimed Western tank was no more survivable than Soviet-era vehicles. A more careful analysis produced a different picture. In every documented case where a Leopard 2 was destroyed by enemy fire in Ukraine, the crew survived. The tank was lost. The crew came home. That outcome was precisely what the Leopard 2's designers had prioritized. The German armor philosophy, derived from the Bundeswehr's analysis of Second World War tank combat, had concluded that the crew was the irreplaceable asset. Tanks could be replaced. Trained tank crews could not. The Leopard 2's armor was designed to protect the crew compartment, even when the vehicle was catastrophically damaged. Ammunition was stored in a bustle at the rear of the turret, with blowout panels that directed explosions away from the crew. The hull was compartmentalized so that an engine fire did not reach the crew. In Ukraine, this philosophy was tested under live fire conditions, and it held. The vehicles were lost. The crews survived. By the end of 2023, Leopard 2 units had participated in the liberation of multiple Ukrainian settlements, provided armored breakthrough capability for infantry assaults on fortified Russian positions, and demonstrated that Western tank crews could be trained on the platform fast enough to achieve combat effectiveness. The tank that Germany had refused to send for 331 days was doing in Ukraine what it had been designed to do since 1979. Protecting its crew, killing the enemy, moving faster than anything it faced. The most controversial tank in modern history. The most wanted tank in modern history. The finest tank in the world, according to the armies of 20 nations that chose it. Germany sent it in the end. It took 331 days, but it came.